Hey guys, welcome to a special broadcast, a special podcast, a unique one. We're Facebook Live. We are on YouTube Live. And if you're watching this in a replay, you may be catching this on any other social media platform. But I have the distinct pleasure. This is a dual broadcast, a dual podcast in this. So let me say this officially. Welcome to the Blacksmith Chronicles podcast, and welcome to the Shaun Tabatt Show podcast as well. So we have dueling podcasters. Instead of dueling banjos, we have dueling podcasters. But instead of dueling, we are actually co-laboring together in this discussion where
no competition. It's I don't know what it is. It's complementary, not competition.
Yeah, and definitely an opportunity for both of us maybe to poke the bear, cause a little bit of aggravation and whatever else we come along with.
Well, there's I feel like there's been a real lack of drama and things to argue about in this season. So I figure, the fire's warm. Let's throw more gas on that fire and see what happens. But yeah. So I'm actually gonna finish sharing. This is what live streaming is really like. I got to finish sharing out to my platform. So I will let you talk for a minute while I do that.
Yeah. So as he's sharing, I want everyone else to continue to share this as well. You're either watching this broadcast live from my personal page, public page, or the Blacksmith Chronicles page, or you're watching us on YouTube. And we do want to encourage you to comment as well. We'll be sharing some of the comments up here in that, whatever format you're listening to. We're going to be able to look at that. And, one comment already comes in. You love poking the bear. Nancy does know me very, very well. Not shy or intimidated to poke the bear when necessary. So that's, it's just part of it. So in this process, so share. I know every time that you're on a Facebook Live, you're always going to hear that host say, share. Right. But that's really what we want you to do, because we want you to join this conversation. We want you to be a part of this, maybe share your experiences, share your questions, whatever the case may be. Again, this is part of the Blacksmith Chronicles podcast, but also the Shaun Tabatt Show. Shaun has a podcast. I tell you what, before we go any further, Shaun, go ahead and tell us about the Shaun Tabatt Show.
Yeah, Shaun Tabatt Show has been running, over 5 years. I think I'm at like 530 some episodes at this point. I lost count. I'd have to look at my site to know the exact number. But like Ryan, I interview a wide range of authors and leaders, like to talk about topics, books, things that are going on in culture, and just kind of whatever happens to strike my fancy. So it's kind of a bit all over the place, but I like that. I'm kind of a shiny object person, so that works out well for me. So yeah. I think, Ryan, you and I met about 1.5 years ago. So we've officially been friends, for like 18 months. I guess it'll be 18 months coming up in December. So that's pretty special. It's a milestone there.
Well, I mean, it is, especially for you, because usually people don't become a friend like that with me for a long time. They check out about month 8 or something around there. They realize
I'm a glutton for punishment. It takes me a lot longer to figure these things out.
That's the reason it's more important for me to be friends with the hard-headed than it is for the lighthearted. So let's kind of get going in on this right here, because this is one of those things that you and I had been discussing, and kind of off and on through text. We text one another quite frequently and talk with each other as well on the phone. And that's definitely a marker of a friend right there, because I'm not a very good phone converser as well. But one of the things that we've talked about is really the attack on culture. And when I say culture, anything that is rooted in some kind of brand of Christianity, being Americans, and so on and so forth. But really and truthfully, we've kind of expounded on this in conversation about what is growingly, increasingly the attack on Christianity in America and how it's connected with Thanksgiving and Christmas and all this stuff and everything. So you reach out to me yesterday and you say, hey, let's talk about this. So give us a little bit of clarity. What was in this thinking before we dive into it?
What was in my heart besides like Ryan wanting to poke the bear? It's interesting as I look back on what it was like to grow up, to celebrate Thanksgiving, celebrate Christmas, the questions people asked around those holidays, the stuff people talked about, it was nothing like what we see today. Now, Ryan and I are about the same age. So although we grew up in different parts of the country, we kind of grew up, probably had a lot of very similar experiences. And, I don't remember growing up, like during Thanksgiving, I don't remember anybody questioning whether the Pilgrims had good motives or bad motives or I feel like I guess let's start with Thanksgiving. That'd be a good place to start because that's coming up here in a few days. One of the dangers, I think, right now, whether we're talking about the Pilgrims and the original Thanksgiving or other aspects of world history, is there's this want of looking through a lens of modern day cultural norms or modern day ideas and trying to impress that upon the motives and the ideas and the intentions of people from centuries past. And that's a pretty dangerous thing to do because, while in some regard, when you look at our founding fathers and the documents that were written to kind of say, hey, this is how you should run a nation. While that was forward looking, a lot of the other ideas of people, going about fulfilling their destiny, their calling, while they were thinking about maybe people in their direct line, they weren't necessarily thinking about, gosh, how is this going to impact people several hundred years from now? I better think a lot about that. So I feel like we project a lot backwards, which has created some pretty interesting circumstances in terms of the questions people are wanting to ask. So yeah, very, very different from Thanksgivings of my, elementary school years. How's that?
It really is, to be honest, because it's easy to look backwards and correct what we see in history, but fail to recognize what we may not perceive in the future. I love how you said that right there, because I was thinking about this the other day, actually, when you and I were kind of discussing this about and granted, it more than likely didn't happen in the Charlie Brown version of all the Pilgrims came together with the Native Americans and they all sat and all this piece. It more than likely didn't happen in that manner, but we have some kind of understanding that some kind of process of thankfulness began to take place. But I imagine as Pilgrims, they didn't sit down and go, man, what are they going to think about us 400 years from now? What are they going to think about this moment? Because we have a difficult time wrapping our own minds around, right now, which you have me outnumbered by a mile, but I have 4 children. It's hard for me to think beyond my grandchildren that are not even yet here. But I know that one day I'll have grandchildren, so I can think along that realm. But to think past that is very, very challenging. And again, this is one of those things. I believe we all live in the moment so much that it's truly, I don't know if I'm going to say impossible, but it's very challenging to live beyond 3 generations.
Right.
And so why, I guess in this, why is it so difficult for our modern culture? And I'm asking you, Shaun, because I'm thinking about this as well. Why is it so difficult in our modern culture to look back and go, you know what? These people were living in the moment. And that was what the moment was defined by. And that's the process. But we feel like we got to correct history. And yes, there are things that are worth correcting. Don't get me wrong. There's definitely things. But there's a vast difference between 1927 and 1627, a vast difference. Why is it so difficult? Why do you feel like it's so difficult for us right now in the council culture, in the whatever culture?
Well, I feel like one of the predominant ideas is that we need to somehow throw off the chains or the restraints of normalcy or tradition or somehow all of these things that we've been told all our lives, like they were wrong or we were lied to, or it was, and to some degree, some people say, well, it's the people who win the wars that write the history. It's the wealthy people that write the history. And to some degree, yeah, that is true to an extent. But this idea that we should just burn it all down and start over is pretty concerning. And we've seen that throughout history in other parts of the world, and that doesn't end very well. At least it has in the past. Maybe we will be the generation that does that right. But I feel like some of it is just wanting to throw off the restraints, the norms, the traditions, because somehow they're suspect and they need to be questioned. Kind of part of a spirit of just sort of, I question all authority. I question what I was told by my parents, my grandparents, the people in charge. So really, I feel like it's trying to throw off any level of boundaries to some. It's like an extension of that kind of. It was just all bad, starting over.
But it's interesting because I feel like when we're talking about, especially the Thanksgiving theme, and I know we run into all these people. Oh, look what they did to the Native Americans. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm not disagreeing with that at all. I know what happened if I go from the time that the nation was started to land being taken away. I get all that. I'm not disagreeing with that. But if I look at the overall picture of this nation, even in our greatest errors, we have made right in our greatest errors. Now, have we perfected it, making it right? Absolutely not. I mean, there's not even remotely close in a lot of areas. However, we have chosen and made decisions and even made laws government-wise to turn whatever that ship is, to persevere in a better manner than what was previously in that. But it's interesting because it seems, it's just, here's where I struggle. How can you not find something to be thankful for? How can you not find something to go, hey, we have this process of at least we can come together with all of our differences, and I can find something to be thankful for. No one's perfect, not even remotely even saying that we're perfect in that, but we can find a place of, I don't know that harmony is the right word, but right, where we can at least get into something where we're singing the same song, hypothetically speaking. We may not be harmonizing, but at least we're not on 5 different scripts, in saying that. I just struggle with the attack that we have in this modern culture where we have to cancel every single thing because, the Pilgrims, they ravaged the land. But here's where I'm just.
I've got a comment. Like, can I stop?
Go ahead.
Yes. I think you have to make a distinction between the Pilgrims and when they originally showed up, what was going on and what their intentions were and what happened later. I think you're going to see that in every situation where you can have a group that starts with, you could say that about our country. The founding fathers had one set of goals and intentions, and what happened past that point, necessarily they weren't responsible for with how laws were interpreted, how things were shaped, how things were shifted. But in terms of the Pilgrims, if you read Bradford's original writings, they came over here. A lot of people say, well, they came over here to escape religious persecution, which is true. That was one of the things they were going after. But they were under some pretty awful conditions in Holland. It's just almost like slave labor factory kind of work. It was destroying their families. A big thing was their children were being influenced negatively by the secular Danish culture, and so they didn't like that. And those were some of the things that brought them over here, besides looking for religious freedom. If you look also at Bradford's writings, he talks about their passion to reach the lost, evangelize, reach people who had never encountered or heard about Jesus at all. So they had really good intentions and things they were going after that brought them over here. Now, how things may have progressed later down the line, I don't know that you can say the Pilgrims, the original Pilgrims, are completely responsible for that. They may be the ones that set that in motion, but can we really hold them responsible for what happened decades, centuries after they showed up on these shores?
Well, that's the interesting thing about it. I've traced my personal family, my history. I've traced it all the way on my father's side. I've traced it all the way to the 1200s. On my mother's side, all the way to the 1500s. And in both cases, I found out that on my mother's side and my father's side, they came over in the Mayflower. They were part of the Mayflower Compact. And they settled in the region not too far from Williamsburg. In both cases, in the same time frame and stuff and everything. And I look at their history, the history of who I am as an individual, and it's interesting because I can see what we would label generational curses. I can see that in a side of my family and go, okay, I know that's generational curse. That curse is, and we've kind of laughed in our own family saying that. Well, in one particular document I found where one of my distant family members, they were actually excommunicated when they landed in Virginia from this because of some of the things that we say is a generational curse in our family. Now, the funny thing is about that is I laugh and go, my gosh, this goes back 400 years, of this generational curse kind of being on this. But here's where I draw the line. Just because that may be a generational curse and that happened, and it obviously did happen because we have historical documentation of it, does that mean I'm supposed to take on the responsibility of that? Does that become my identity? Because I rejected it. And I continue to reject it. So how much of my own past am I supposed to carry, even though it is something that I have rejected because I recognized early on that this is the path I couldn't take for my family? So I'm sharing that story to say you may have descendants that goes all the way back, we'll say, to that first Thanksgiving and the error that was with that in that aspect of it. At what point do we stop going, you're just as evil as they are? That's where I'm struggling in some of this. How do I keep taking credit for something that someone did 450 years ago? Does that make sense what I'm saying? At what point do we stop pointing the finger of blame and we start recognizing, hey, let's focus on some of the good stuff that they did. Learn from the bad, turn from the bad, but let's kind of focus and see what we can do from that. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing we have to do with any kind of a movement, or as we learn about people throughout history. We can see good things that they did. We can see bad things that maybe things that were unintentional came about, and we can take the good and try to learn from that. And also, I guess, as they say, eat the meat and spit out the bones. But I think you do hit on something that's obviously been a challenging theme in this season, is the idea of are we responsible for what our ancestors did 200, 300, 400 years ago? And that's a pretty hard burden to ask somebody to carry. I mean, if you're, how many generations back is that from if we go all the way back to the Pilgrims and the Mayflower, that's a lot of time. And while there may be things in our family lines, we could say generational blessings and curses that, are certainly impacting what we're about today. It's a pretty weak argument to say that I should be responsible or you should be responsible. Although I don't have the benefit of having had descendants on the Mayflower. My wife did, but my people came over much, much later. So we're still pretty new kids on the block at this point. But it's just a hard argument to have, because so even if you can convince me, if my family came over on the Mayflower and say, well, Shaun, some bad stuff went down. You need to, I guess I could apologize on behalf of my people if you really wanted me to, but that doesn't really change anything in the present, since I actually wasn't alive back then. So, and I know for some people listening, they're like, oh, wow, you guys are treading on some thin ice here, guys. And so we know that, but we're just trying to have a conversation, that's as much, if we want to make a legal precedent out of it. Let's say my great-great-grandfather robbed a bank. He committed a crime, and he never got caught. And it comes out years later that my great-great-grandfather robbed this bank. Do you get to therefore come and arrest me for his crime because I'm a direct descendant of him? I mean, it's a different kind of scenario, but it would be a similar kind of thing there. And so, to lay blame cross-generationally is an interesting concept. I mean, have we ever really seen, maybe I'm just ignorant. I don't know of another time throughout history where we've tried to lay cross-generational blame, maybe even I would say shame people into feeling bad about where they came from. I've never seen it to this level. And maybe I don't know that that's happened in other times throughout history, but it seems kind of a modern phenomenon as we're really projecting backwards right now in this season.
Well, it does in this nation, especially because Thanksgiving is an American thing. It's you may have other parts of other nations that may celebrate it out of their own free will, but it's not a national holiday like it is in America, which is ultimately instituted under President Lincoln many years ago. And the reason that he institutes Thanksgiving is not necessarily as in remembrance of the Pilgrims as much as it is we need to have a day set aside that we take time to thank God and have a thankful heart of what he's done. But when you take God, Christ, and Holy Spirit out of the picture, I think that's where we end up, because we have a culture that now finds fault in what is supposedly the format. Now, again, I'm saying this because Thanksgiving in its original form was not, hey, we need to emulate what the Pilgrims did. It was maybe a skeleton structure of how it comes together, but really the heart, according to everything I've read, I mean, you've read a lot on it too, so correct me if I'm wrong, but the structure of it was to set aside the day where families would come together and they would give thanks to the Lord for all the things, even in the midst, and we have to remember this, even in the midst of war and chaos, set aside a day where we can come together. Hey, it's over a meal. I don't know how anybody can be upset over food. That's first of all, good turkey and dressing, cranberries, mac and cheese. How can you be upset with pumpkin pie?
Mac and cheese for Thanksgiving, that is not a thing from my Minnesota roots. Is that a thing in the South?
Mac and cheese goes with everything. God, we got to get you in the South. I mean, come on.
We're working on it.
So these are things that I think the misconception continues to have us. But granted, again, this is a very American mindset, because it's like in our current generation, we have to look at things. I believe I've said it this way before. I think we're looking through the binoculars the wrong way. Where we're supposed to put the blockers on and everything far away comes up in perception where we can see it. Sure. We have reversed the lenses and we look at it and everything becomes so far away, but it even becomes so small, we can't even recognize what we're looking at. And I feel like that's a massive problem right now.
Well, I think this will dovetail into where we go with when we transition to talking about Christmas. I feel like there is a want right now culturally to remove anything related to the Christian faith from all holidays, that somehow we can magically just press a button or flip a switch and we can remove any semblance of Christian faith from Thanksgiving or Christmas or all semblance of cultures, because we've just decided it's bad and it needs to be tossed away. I mean, I feel like that is one of the driving forces or wants by parts of cultures, like we just need to secularize everything because then it'll somehow be better. And I think the sad reality is, especially with Christmas, but even with Thanksgiving, if we start removing the faith aspects and we start removing what that original Pilgrim generation came here, what they were going after, we sort of lose the meanings of the holidays. And then it's great to get together with friends and family and have a meal, but it's also a remembrance and a celebration of those things, not unlike Passover. So you can sit down and tell future generations about what happened, what came before, how we ended up here. I mean, that's what we should, I think, likely be doing at Thanksgiving, is talking with our own children and grandchildren about the original Thanksgiving. Why? I mean, what a story and a legacy of why those people came here in terms of, wanting better for their family, wanting their children to be raised in the faith and not overly impacted by the culture they were a part of before they jumped on the ship and that sort of a thing. Those are all good values for us to remember and instill in our own families. And so, I think as a holiday of remembrance and really celebrate, and also just celebrating a key aspect for the founding of our nation. It's not, as much as people want it to be bad, it's not wrong to be patriotic, to love your country, want good things for your country. And this, it's, if we think about the last few years, it's been this slow chipping away of like cultural foundations. But if we throwing away Thanksgiving is kind of like throwing away the book of Genesis in the Bible. Once you throw that away, stuff that comes later stops making sense, and it's just you start losing your bearings. And so, I think if you can get rid of Thanksgiving and get rid of some of those original ideas, then you start to lose some of the core foundations of where this nation started. And then, for better or worse, you can rewrite history and make it what you want, what you'd like it to be, or modernize it to some extent. So. And I don't know that that's everybody's intentions necessarily. I think a lot of people right now are very emotional in culture. It's a really challenging time. We've got 4 generations in the workplace and in the church right now. But I feel like some of us who are a bit younger, we can tend to live by our emotions and not think as much. And so it's real easy to get offended by the thing that's like, I liked your analogy of the binoculars, rather than using them the correct way, where I get this broader view. It's almost like a microscope where I'm looking at just one thing up close. And to some degree, in terms of a lot of the arguments in culture right now, I think we need to stop being at like the 5-foot view and go back up to the 10,000 foot view and really get a broader picture and think through, okay, what's going on here logically, as opposed to always being stuck in this constant state of anxiety and angst. Yeah.
and I'm going to go ahead and say this, because this is our hour. If where I'm at in the state of Tennessee, we're not threatened with Thanksgiving at all. But I want to speak to those that maybe you're in a state and they're telling you not to get together. Listen, okay, I just want I'm going to poke the governmental bear right here. All right. So if you're allowed to go into Home Depot, Lowe's, Walmart, Publix, whatever grocery store, and there's 100 people in that room with you, not counting the cashiers, not counting the clerks, not counting the stock boys or anything else. I'm talking about customers, 100 people in that store. But your government is telling you can't have your family over because of COVID and this and that. I think you need to have a little bit of a pilgrim spirit rise up into you. And you need to have that family over. Now, I'm not telling you to be reckless. I'm not telling you to be stupid. If you've got family members that are they're already having some kind of sickness that they're dealing with, and COVID could be a threat, use your sense in that, and don't do that. But what I'm saying is, in this, if you can do all those other things, go to the grocery store, go to Walmart, and I don't know how COVID escapes Home Depot and Lowe's, but obviously nobody gets COVID at the big box, home improvement stores. So maybe you ought to go have Thanksgiving dinner there at the patio furniture of the Home Depot. I don't know. But what I'm saying is, guys, come on. Have Thanksgiving dinner at your house. It's okay. It's okay. Have your moment. This is Ryan speaking. I'm not speaking on behalf of Shaun Tabatt. So nobody panic or anything like that. This is Ryan saying this. Have your Thanksgiving dinner, folks. If you got those family members that it's not good for them to be around, don't let them come around. I get that. But guys, come on. This is our moment right now to really demonstrate to the current culture that this is possible to live and press through on that side of it. So that's my little Thanksgiving rant on that,
Your turkey wielding soapbox moment. I think one of the interesting things interesting has been my word of the week or month as I've been podcasting lately, which has been fun. But in terms of pressure for Christians, this is probably the year we've had the most, I'm going to use the word persecution, but we've got nothing on Christians in other parts of the world in terms of what they endure related to persecution. But I think in the Western church, we're actually seeing meaningful pushback on how we express our faith for the first time ever. And so some of it is, I think we're still trying to figure out what to do with it. We're like, what? I can't go to church anymore. And I couldn't celebrate Easter with my church family. And I'm not supposed to celebrate Thanksgiving with my family. And if the trajectory remains, we're probably not going to be able to celebrate Christmas either, because COVID will probably be a thing, and it's interesting. Like, I feel like to some degree, people are still in shock, and they're kind of not, we're still trying to find out what's going on with the election, let alone thinking about the holidays. But I feel like as we've had so many competing traumas, or my favorite phrase would be dumpster fires this year. It's been hard to know which thing to focus on because there's been so many things going on. But if history is an indicator, when stuff gets taken away, it typically doesn't get given back. And, in full disclosure, I tend to be very pessimistic initially by nature when I was like, oh my gosh, the worst thing that could happen, that will probably happen. But I was in tech support for 11 years and I had to think through the worst case scenarios all the time. It is concerning in terms of freedoms that get taken away don't always get given back. And so that is something that we just need to at least be aware of. There's a reason they call it standing up for faith. And, like Ryan, I'm also not saying do something stupid. If you break the orders of your county or your state, you may have some legal ramifications to what you're doing. I don't know. You're going to have to make that choice on your own. But that's why they call it standing up or standing for faith, because it means something. It looks like something. Standing against something means you're opposing something. That's actually what the Pilgrims did. And so it's just a very challenging time because we as the American church or Christians in the United States are having for the first time to examine, does our faith actually mean something, look like something, practically get worked out in our life? Maybe we're starting to see the places in our day-to-day that our faith actually doesn't penetrate the exterior of that box or that compartment. And so I feel like people have just been wrestling in a big way with all the different parts of their life. And does their faith actually matter or make a difference? I mean, just think of how many, and God bless my friends further south than where I'm at. A lot of folks have barely been affected in terms of churches being open and being able to live and do life as normal. That's not been the case further north or on the West Coast and East Coast, certainly. But yeah, I feel like we're having to wrestle for the first time like never before. And while it's challenging, I think big picture wise, I think it's actually a good thing because we really do need to realize that our faith should look like something, should mean something, that it's not all in our heads. It's not all listening and discussion. Sometimes it's action and just taking a stand.
So we now, because you bring out an interesting point, because we're in this battle right now in the simplicity, it seems like, even though it's not really simple, of Thanksgiving. And we're quickly going to transition to Christmas, which at my house, it's been Christmas.
On Friday, we're transitioning into Christmas. So, I mean, now you have a Christmas tree up already.
Yeah. Well, officially, the world will transition the day after Thanksgiving. But in my house, we've had 7 Christmas trees up since the second week of October. So it's been Christmas at our house for quite a while.
More Christmas trees than people in your house.
Yeah, there's 3 in our, one in the kind of foyer, 2 in the living room. So that's 3. And the rest are in bedrooms. So the only bedroom it didn't get it is my 14-year-old son, and he's too cool for the Christmas tree in his room, but we love Christmas, but man, have I caught it in times past. This year, ironically, I didn't catch it, but last year, Shaun, I posted a picture of the Christmas tree that my wife had decorated. I'm always extremely proud of anything that my wife creates, and she has this creative gene to create these wreaths and these, decorations, and she's really, really gifted in that. And I shared a picture of a Christmas tree. You would have thought I said that the picture of the Last Supper was sacrilegious. Compared to the onslaught of people that just wailed me as a Christian for having a Christmas tree. I even got called a Catholic. And I'm not sure how that, and it was connected to, the paganism of Christmas and so on and so forth. And the Christmas tree.
How do you live with those pagan symbols in your house, right?
Yeah. Well, in the conversation, I just begin to tell people from here on out, you need to call me Father Johnson. So, if I'm going to be labeled as a Catholic, at least make it official and call me Father Johnson, But I'm sharing this little tidbit here because the war on Christmas, we've talked about that terminology for years now. I believe there's some legitimate claims to the war on Christmas. But here's the thing about Christmas that's different than Thanksgiving. the world wants to change the identity of Christmas, take everything Christ out of it. But then at the same time, Christians are annihilating other Christians for celebrating Christmas. So it's not just the world versus Christmas. It is the world and Christians versus Christmas. 'Tis the season to be merry, right?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the interesting challenges Christians and I think churches are facing right now, and I think it sort of ties loosely into what you're saying, is wanting to be accepted by culture, wanting to get a high five, or somehow looking for approval from the world. And so if there are people in the world that might be offended by Christmas or this or that or my faith, and not that we should like willfully go around offending people and making people mad, but if you're offended by my beliefs or how I practice Christmas, okay, great. You can even tell me you don't like it. Okay, I'm sorry that somehow disturbs you. Anyways, moving on. I mean, I don't have to change how I celebrate Christmas or whatever. And you know, last I checked, although it's been questionable this year, we do live in a free country with free speech and freedom of expression and all those things. So, you know, there's nothing wrong with Ryan choosing to have 7 Christmas trees and celebrate that way. You know, even if you think they're somehow a throwback to a pagan symbol, maybe Ryan and his family is working to redeem those pagan symbols in his home. I don't know. But yeah, I almost feel like we've entered this season where, especially in the church, oddly, everybody's decided I am going to be offended on behalf of everybody else. I'm going to fight for everybody else's rights and everybody else's freedoms and all these different things. And so you know, whether we want to just call them social justice warriors or just culture warriors, whatever label you want to give it, some of the people who yell and scream the loudest are far removed from anybody that they're saying is offended. Like, it's not actually the people that they're often saying are offended who are attacking you about your Christmas tree or whatever it might be. It's some other random person where you're like, how other than that, you've just decided that you're inserting yourself in the middle here. How do you have like a dog in this fight? I'm so confused why this is a hill for you to die on. So it's been interesting. And maybe we're just all angsty and pent up and just need to let some steam out and go toe to toe on something. But that I feel like I've seen that a lot this year, where the people fighting fights barely have, you know, any kind of a dog in the fight, as near as I can tell.
It's interesting. First of all, in that battle last year, I actually said, "Oh, it's not a Christmas tree; it's a redemption tree." And that's what I actually called it. I said, we redeemed it. I rebuked the curses, renounced the paganism. We redeemed it. The lights are redeemed. The ornaments are redeemed. Everything about the tree has been redeemed.
Well, and in fact, I hear you only water the trees with holy water blessed by a priest. So
absolutely. Well, you know, that's when you are the father, you can do that. You know, when you are a father in that realm. So, but that is the aspect of it. That's funny because I did actually say that last year. Of course, I was being a little facetious in saying that. I even posted the lyrics instead of "Oh Christmas Tree." I posted the lyrics to "Oh Pagan Tree."
Oh no!
Yeah,
well, the irony of that. I mean, you know, I think, what do we get? "Oh Christmas Tree" from the German song "Oh Tannenbaum," which is literally translated as "Oh Pine Tree." I mean, that's not super religious.
Now, well, you know, the funny thing, even a little bit further into all that, is I get tickled at people correcting me for my paganism of Christmas, embracing Christmas while wearing clothing that is, you know, that can be very questionable of where it came from and who is it connected to, wearing their Beyonce or the Jay-Z cologne, while correcting me on Facebook and Twitter and all these different platforms that I could connect paganism to on multiple levels, but you're going to choose to come against because of a tree in our room. And this is one of the things that I think where we struggle, because what may be perceived in our house to put up a Christmas tree, in your house, it may not be perceived to put up a Christmas tree. That doesn't make us better. than any other family. It doesn't make us lesser than any other family. It is just where that family is at in that moment. But what's interesting about, because you do bring up the fact of, it seems like so many want to be on the right side of history. So they redefine history. And so and when I say this modern culture, I don't mean just a younger generation. I'm talking about everybody that's a part of it. This modern culture, it seems like it is more important to be in right standing with public opinion than it is to be in right standing with your own convictions according to the word. Do you find that?
Yeah. Ironically, I think if we look back on traditional histories, I'll call it, just to be clear at this point, it's often the outliers. It's often the people who were pushing against the grain of culture that we somehow came to revere as people who changed the world, who changed history, who did the impossible, overcame impossible odds. Often it wasn't everybody who got swept up in moves of the culture that somehow made the big difference and took a stand. So, yeah.
Why do you think, though? I guess the way I'm thinking about this is, why is it every single year we are in this war, hypothetically, against Christmas?
Right. I think it's a distraction, honestly, to some degree, in terms of it allows us just to fight about a bunch of stuff that some of it is kind of irrelevant. You know, whether you say I'm going to say Merry Christmas all the time because I'm a Christian and I observe Christmas because I'm celebrating the birth of my Lord and Savior. So you can tell me Happy Holidays, I'll say Merry Christmas. Am I offended that you say Happy Holidays? Not really. Honestly, I don't care. You can use whatever phrase you want to use there. But I feel like it can be kind of a distraction from, so if we get all bent out of shape every Christmas and, I'm attacking Ryan because he's got 7 Christmas trees and those are pagan symbols, and I'm going to war with all the people at the store who've been told to say Happy Holidays and not Merry Christmas and whatnot, that's really great. But like, in terms of the posture of my heart, I'm probably not in a great place to be celebrating Christmas and communing with the Lord. I'm probably not spreading kingdom stuff around as I'm warring on Facebook and everything else around me to try to right all the wrongs that are being done to Christmas. You become this sort of bizarre warrior for Christmas while completely forgetting how to celebrate Christmas. I mean, because I can't think of anything more antithetical to Christmas, the hope of the world, coming on the scene than just fighting with everybody about small things or petty things. The reality is culture is going to shift and change. And to some degree, we have to sort of roll with it. But I feel like sometimes we get too easily offended by some of these things. And there's other stuff that we should totally be offended by that we just completely fail to notice or, want to take a stand on. Now, to get offended about the Christmas trees or Happy Holidays versus Merry Christmas, there's not a lot at stake. I can fight with people all day long. Most people don't care about that, but I can feel like I'm doing something. There are other things I could decide to get concerned about in culture that actually would cost me something. And then that's a totally different ballgame versus the Christmas trees, Happy Holidays. Those are easy fight. Nobody's going to call me to task on any of that, most likely. Now, if I start standing up to other things, well, that might be a different story. So I feel like it's a distraction. And if you want to go after that, it's an easy place to fight and argue. And it feels like I'm doing something really good, but So some of my apologetics minded friends are like, "Oh, Shaun, you're totally wrong." So I have friends who are like totally disagreeing with what I say, but I feel to some degree it is a bit of a distraction.
Well, here's one of the things. The terminology "Happy Holidays" is supposed to cover, as far as I understand, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, all down the list. Okay,
right? Yep.
All the way through to the New Year. However, I find it interesting that at Thanksgiving, no one ever says Happy Holidays, or the New Year, no one ever says Happy Holidays.
Right.
It's only around the Christmas side of it that people really kind of force the Happy Holidays. And again, I'm the same way. I will admit this. I'm the same way in the sense of, if someone says Happy Holidays to me, my first response is Merry Christmas. That is always my first response. I just say Merry Christmas. I'm not a happy holidays kind of guy.
We oddly had people telling us Happy Halloween this year. I'm just like, what? That was really like a bunch of people as we were out trick or treating this year, going to the store around Halloween. People are on Halloween, like Happy Halloween. I'm like, what? Like that? I've never encountered that before in all my years. It's like I just take my kids out so they can get free candy. But outside of that, I'm not like super psyched about Halloween or anything.
You know, when people, if they say Happy Thanksgiving, I say Happy Thanksgiving, but I'm not the first guy to go, hey, Happy Thanksgiving. I'm not typically that guy. But now I will say this, and I know this is not going to come to a shock to those that know me. But if you look at me and say Happy Holidays, and I say Merry Christmas, and then comes that look, and they go, Happy Holidays. I, in turn, now
Merry Christmas.
will go Merry Christmas. And I will make sure to say Merry Christmas as often and as much as I can. It's kind of like the Father God prayers. You know, the people that pray, Father God, Father God, Father God, Father God, help, Father God, us, Father God. I will say Merry Christmas as much as I can because now I recognize it's a sore spot. Now,
right.
That may make me an evil person, but this is just, this is my joy in life. You know, I have a little bit of fun at the expense of others.
Now that you've redeemed the pagan trees, now it's time to redeem that part of your personality. I think in terms of Christmas, the bigger concern for me, it's not whether or not people have Christmas trees. It's not whether or not they're saying Happy Holidays or Merry Christmas. It's more about all the other trappings of Christmas, Frosty the Snowman. And I don't hate snowmen or anything, but Santa Claus and elves and all these other kind of side stories and things that completely overshadow the true meaning of Christmas. That to me is more concerning because there are a whole lot of kids who know everything about the Grinch and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and this, that, and the other thing. And they have no idea that Christmas has anything to do with the birth of Jesus. That's like removing baby Jesus out of Christmas. That's the most concerning thing to me. A lot of this other stuff, I feel like it's just arguing to feel like you're actually moving the needle or doing something, but a lot of it's inconsequential. If you start actually get to the root of, well, if baby Jesus isn't part of Christmas, then, well, we've kind of lost the true meaning of Christmas. There's no point. We may as well just call it something else if that's not important for the holiday anymore.
But you know them as well as I do. The minute we talk about the birth of Christ, there's that group of Christians. Well, he wasn't really born December 25th. Well, no, duh, Sherlock. It's just a day that we are observing. Right. I celebrate March 1st is my birthday. For anybody who wants to get a gift, March 1st is coming up in a few months. But the only reason I celebrate March 1st is because that's what I was told.
Right.
I have no recognition of it. I was just told that. So I celebrate that day as the day of my birth. So there's a day that's picked because someone told me they were actually there. Now, I'm not saying that to say that Jesus was literally born on December 25th. We think that it's possibly September. Some scholars have even said they think it is April. It is. I don't know the exact day and time, but I do know that he was born. But here's the flip side of all that. I'm seeing like what we done in our family. I wanted my children to know. Now, my oldest is fixing to be next month, 22. My youngest is 9. And I wanted my children to know the real story of what now is Santa Claus, but at the time would have been Saint Nicholas. And so I would, do the research and everything. I actually taught on this for years at another church where I was on staff and stuff and everything about how we even got to where we're at. Now, granted, I know we're a far way from where we should be concerning the original life of St. Nicholas.
Right.
But it is important to recognize, I believe, to teach who St. Nicholas was, the man, not the idea behind Santa Claus or anything like that. But you understand, if you can understand the name or the person of the real Saint Nick and what he did, even in the simplicity of one of the things that always fascinated me, beside preaching the gospel, and he did that. One of the things that fascinated me is in the wintertime, they would take their socks, their stockings, and they would hang them at the fireplace. So at night they would dry from the cold weather and stuff. And he literally would go in these villages and he would drop coal inside that stocking for them to be able to warm their house. Now, today, we laugh and say, if you got coal for Christmas, it means you were a bad boy because you didn't get the good gift. But the reality is that's why now today you see stockings hung at the fireplace. That's where that originally comes. So there's an authenticity. And I think it would do Christians a lot of good to learn the true story behind stuff. I agree. It's been manipulated. It's been taken way out of context. It has been, it's taken further than and commercialized. Yes, Christmas has been commercialized. But at the same time, it's kind of funny because a lot of that commercialization has fed a lot of families. So, it's kind of like, as bad as it is, again, we can find some good that's come out of it. And granted, just because it's commercialized doesn't mean that you have to take it. You don't have to take in that thing that is being poured out on that. But, again, that's just some of my Christmas rants.
Well, and I think that's one of the wonderful things about familiarizing ourselves with different times in history, actually reading the Bible, all that sort of thing to have a good grounding in where things come from, why we do the things we do. Often I feel like, especially today, we know barely this much about why we do this. Where did this cultural idea come from? And the more that we can get connected with the ideas that built Western culture in a broad sense, it's going to really help us understand why we do the things we do. And maybe I think to some degree, I feel like you need to understand history to know where you should be going. I feel like one of the big dangers in this season, and not even necessarily related to Thanksgiving and Christmas, but broadly in culture, right now people are like, oh my gosh, look at this new idea. We've never seen this idea before. It's going to be amazing. And then if you actually know history, you're like, oh, this has been tried before. And you could say that about stuff we see in culture, in government, in the church, where people are just completely ignorant of history and ideas. Scary, some that aren't, and they're just trying to repackage them, but that's for a different discussion. And I feel like when we don't have a good grounding in what's happened in the past, we're just destined to kind of fall into those same things in the future. I mean, so many of the battles that we're waging today in the church were battles that have already been fought. We just don't realize that people had already taken care of those. I mean, look at the creeds and the confessions and things from church history. There were knockdown dragouts with heretics and false teachers over what it meant to be a Christian and what the faith was really about. And we see a lot of those same things just getting recycled over and over again today. So that to me is probably one of the most disturbing things I see right now is we're fairly biblically ignorant. We're ignorant of world history, church history, American history. And so culturally, we're not very adept to function well and think well. We can tell you what's popular on Netflix and we can tell you about all kinds of crazy stuff. But not having that broader feel for history and how we became who we are as a nation, as a church, as Christians, I feel like we're sorely wanting in the knowledge department right now. And that's not to say I've read everything and know everything. I just think broadly, it would do us well to connect with original sources and stuff written by read William Bradford to figure out what was going on with the Pilgrims. We have a lot of information that other people have regurgitated to us or repackaged and given to us, if you will. But we've often failed to go to original sources these days. So we're reading somebody else's thoughts about somebody else's thoughts, sometimes many layers deep. So, I would challenge people as much as you're able in certain topics, acquaint yourself with original writings because you'll get a better perspective on why it's important and really better understand what shaped the world, both in American culture and church culture that we're a part of.
I think that as you're saying that, my mind goes back to reading some of the stories of the American revolutionists at Christmas and reading some of those stories and why that, what they shared and very, very Christ-centered in the middle of battle at Christmas time, And so that really kind of, piqued my interest when I've read those stories of history and stuff. And I'm a historical nut, so I've read a lot on it myself, and I enjoy it. And there's a reason I'm wholeheartedly agree with everything you say. So I do want to say this to those that are on the live view. I want to encourage you. Got a question to ask that question here. I know we've been on for a little bit, but maybe we can get your question in. But just to kind of lighten this up right here, Shaun, I have to ask the most important question. What's your favorite Christmas movie?
Oh, man. I always like to say Die Hard first, because some people know, some people, like half the people already think Die Hard's a Christmas movie. And then there's the other half who are like, Die Hard. And it's like, well, it takes place as Chris. So I always say Die Hard. I don't really like that. Truth be told, it's not really, I've seen it. I don't, whatever. I can take it or leave it. Modern, more recent. I mean, I think Will Ferrell's Elf movie is a modern classic. I always say for Elf, that movie needs to be part of undergraduate anthropology studies, because it's the perfect movie, because you have a man who is put into a completely different culture and then re-immersed in the world his family is a part of. So an interesting character study, a lot more entertaining than some of the books I had to read for my anthropology classes in college. But yeah, modern would definitely be Elf. And then, man, old Christmas movies, animated would probably have to be Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, just because the funky claymation of that age was pretty epic for its time. But yeah, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Elf. How about you, man? What are your favorite Christmas movies? Way to lighten it up a little bit.
Hey, my favorite all time, no ifs, ands, or buts about it, is Christmas Vacation.
Yep. Also a modern classic.
I'm a huge Christmas Vacation fan. I quote a lot of lines from the edited version of Christmas
Made
Vacation.
for TV version.
Yeah.
Yes. But a fantastic meme this week where it showed that scene where he gets the Jelly of the Month Club certificate, and it said, "If 2020 were a bonus check."
That's like, exactly right. Yep. I love that movie. Honestly, I've never seen A Christmas Story. I've never been drawn to A Christmas Story.
People are either really love that one or can't stand it. I mean, I've seen it. I have so many friends and family that love it, and I'm just like, I don't get it. I would rather watch Elf 10 times than watch Christmas Story once, to be honest.
Yeah, Elf would be my second one as far as that. To me, it just don't get any better than Christmas Vacation. I just, there's so many great one-liners, and I could get on that for a long time. But, as far as the older ones, my wife loves Frosty the Snowman. She gets emotional at Frosty the Snowman.
It's sad. You wonder, did he ever come back? I mean, I don't know.
That's her favorite. I got a lot of good memories as a child. And my parents and us watching Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. It was a big deal when Rudolph came on.
We actually watched Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer with our family, and then my wife's siblings, their families are here as well. And so I think it was last year, and I like the adults sat down and watched it more through our current modern lens. We're like, holy crap, there's bullying and all. Like, if you watch Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer through a modern lens, it's a terrible movie. All the stuff that goes on, Yukon Cornelius removing all the teeth from the abominable snowman guy. I mean, it's actually a very violent and disturbing movie. Now, I find like there's a lot of stuff that my parents let me watch as a kid. When I see it now, I'm like, what? Why did my parents let me watch that? But through a modern lens, I don't think Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer would ever get made, because it's there's some pretty awful stuff that happens. I mean, just think of Herbie wanting to be a dentist and how he gets ridiculed and bullied by the other elves. I mean, there's some pretty harsh cultural things going on.
Yeah, well, I could relate to the Island of Misfit Toys, so I could relate to that. But as an adult, in all honesty, the Charlie Brown gets me. Charlie Brown Christmas, it gets me as an adult every time. When Linus gives the speech about the birth of Christ, as an adult watching a cartoon, I tear up every single time. And I don't know why, which I do know why. I think there's, in all honesty, even though it's a cartoon, I think there's an anointing on that scene.
Yeah.
And that's so crazy, but I just get caught up and I'm crying at a cartoon. Oh my gosh,
That's where the Christmas tree thing came from. You and your wife are redeeming the pathetic Christmas tree that Charlie Brown had to endure.
That's for sure. That is that. I got a good friend, Joel Burton, said, you kind of sound like you're getting ready to break right now. I may be, Charlie Brown gets me, or I get Charlie Brown. I don't know. In that. So, again, just for the next, I don't know how much time Shaun has here. We've been on here exactly for an hour right now.
Yeah,
but
we can keep going. I got more stuff I'd like to talk about. If people want to ask questions, they certainly.
Yeah, get your questions up, but if you don't get it, get that and hit us with some of the things that's on your heart there, Shaun.
Otherwise, Ryan and I'll just keep making stuff up. I was going to go back. We didn't talk about favorite Thanksgiving dishes besides macaroni and cheese, which is a Minnesotan. I'm just like, the heck, I'm going to do that. Like Minnesota classic Thanksgiving dishes, definitely like sweet potatoes with like melted marshmallows and butter and brown sugar. That was one.
Throw the pecans in there.
Yep. Stovetop stuffing, oddly, which some people love that or hate it. I don't know. That was, maybe that just shows the redneck Minnesota ways of where I came from. What else? Sour cream and raisin pie, which not everybody's going to know what that is, but it's really, my grandfather loved that. It's a unique concoction, but that good Thanksgiving and Christmas memories. That was something my grandpa's family had a lot. So it's super rich and over the top crazy, but probably hard to find these days.
They don't even
more for me.
I love sour cream on a baked potato, but I mean,
yeah, I don't know.
Just don't even
I
sound
can't even
right.
don't even tell you how to make it. It tastes really good. So
no, there's no way. I'm sorry. Wesley agrees with me. Wait, what? Sour cream and raisin pie? Ugh.
You just guys haven't been sanctified with the sour cream and raisin pie.
Oh, that's awful. Oh God, that's awful. No, my wife makes the sweet potato with the pecans and everything.
Thank you, John. I'll get to it later. Maybe I'm going to have to find like a Zoom healing room scenario because I can't go in person, but I'll let you know how that goes.
See, we don't do stovetop in the South. We do cornbread dressing.
Okay.
Oh, thank you, Jesus. And I'm with Joel on this one. Deep fried deviled eggs.
Ooh, I've never had that. I could go. I love me some deviled eggs. Just not at Christmas time because that seems wrong. But for Thanksgiving, fine, sure.
Yeah, I will tell you this. Let me. This is an interesting kind of a side note here on this that is a true story. If we say Thanksgiving and we say Thanksgiving dinner, we just start naming turkey, ham, dressing, potatoes, green beans, sweet potato pie, whatever. We start naming all those things. So for years, my wife and our children, we didn't do Thanksgiving with our family because I just celebrated an anniversary yesterday. And usually our anniversary was around Thanksgiving. So we would go off with the kids and, celebrate kind of our own. And then we lived away for a number of years. So there was a time that we would come home, and we came home one Thanksgiving, and we lived up north. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of real Southern food up north. That's just the reality of it. I'm with you, Zach, deep fried turkey. And so I'm excited about coming to the South to get some Thanksgiving food. Y'all understand what I'm saying? Thanksgiving food. Things that you're going to get at Thanksgiving. I walk into the house, Shaun, true story. I walk into the house, and there is frozen pizza everywhere. Different kinds of Sam's Club frozen pizza, which is not horrible by any stretch of the imagination, but it's Thanksgiving and it's pizza. And I'm like, frozen pizza, that. I'm like, what in the world happened? So I had this aunt that she decided that instead of because everywhere she goes, she had Thanksgiving dinner.
Sure.
But for most of us, this was our one Thanksgiving dinner. So she didn't want Thanksgiving dinner. So she chose, let's do frozen pizza. I was so mad. So the next year we go back home. Walk in the door. I'm expecting turkey and dressing. And I'm some pecan pie. I'm expecting all this. I walk in the door. It is Subway sandwiches. True story. And I am frustrated now. And it shows on me that I am mad about this. Same aunt does the same dish. I got my mother and I got my grandparents together and I said, I don't care what we have to do, but the next time I come into this house for Thanksgiving, she is not to be in charge of this ever again. I should not be able to come into a house expecting a Thanksgiving meal and get something I can get through a drive-through. You have got to be kidding me. There's just something about certain things at Thanksgiving in this. I just rant over. This is a deep wound. I need sozo inner healing, obviously. And I have great offense against my aunt, but I have redeemed the Christmas tree.
Yeah, take it one season at a time. I guess one thing we probably haven't addressed that we could go into would be the challenge of people not being able to gather in this season. As we think about Thanksgivings and Christmases past, where maybe that was the 1 or 2 times a year that we saw our extended family, and just how that's something probably to navigate very carefully this season. Because I think, as many of us have discovered with church, doing church over Zoom isn't the same as doing church in person. Like you lose so much of the context of the fellowship by just being in front of your computer, like you are all day for work and whatnot. So I think it's just something to be mindful of as we're celebrating this year. Is while we can certainly call our friends and relatives, and for those we can't gather with, there is actually, I think it's worth noting, there's a significant loss of context and relational value and exchange that just can't exist virtually, for better or worse. I'm hoping next year we can be more in a state of normalcy where we can get together as per normal and just do what we've done in many years past. But I think that is kind of a difficulty this season, where I feel like we've realized it in part with having to largely miss Easter and just the inability to gather. I think people are going to feel it more acutely as we get to Thanksgiving and Christmas, because I feel like those are probably the 2 main holidays people reconnect with family, sometime for the only time throughout the year. So I feel like that's just something to be mindful of, and maybe to prepare yourself for. You actually might be kind of depressed and sad about it because you know it's coming, but you're probably not going to realize it until you're in the moment.
Yeah, for me, that's the way it was. I had a grandmother that we went to Thanksgiving and Christmas, and I literally saw her as an adult. When I was a child, I would go and spend a few weeks with her in the summer. But as an adult, I only saw her twice a year.
Right.
Thanksgiving and Christmas. That's it. And I know there's a lot of people that's having to make difficult decisions. And I was reading someone's post just the other day, and I thought, man, that's pretty challenging. And it's real. I think it was actually Billy Hallowell that made this point. I believe it was him, mutual connection between us. And he made the point, I believe I'm crediting him right, of, a lot of people are making the decision not to spend time with family because they don't want to potentially cause any harm or anything. Yet this could be the last opportunity you get to spend with that family.
Yeah.
And it's such a valid point and a really profound moment. Granted, if you've got a relative that's, 87 years old, you're weighing, I don't want to, make them an opportunity for them to get sick. And I get that, but this may be the last Thanksgiving you get with them, or Christmas, whatever the case may be. And that's a hard decision to make. And I think it's something you have to pray through as a believer in this. Right. And I personally believe that in a lot of these decisions that people are having to make is, we do, for those of us that are sons of God, we have the ability to seek God's counsel in this and determine what, we need to do, for that moment. Now, I don't have a problem with anybody saying, you know what, we're just not going to gather because I don't want to take the chance. I'm all for you making that decision. What I do have a problem with is the government telling me that I can or cannot do that. And that's the problem where I struggle in this part of it. I'm all for if Shaun and I are friends and Shaun said, listen, our family's not doing anything. We're not taking the chance. Hey, I respect that. I honor that. That's a decision that's best for he and his family. Whereas, our family, we're gathering, in that. But that decision is my decision. That decision is Shaun's decision. I'm just a big thing of, I don't think the government should force that, which goes back to that pilgrimage thing. In reality, it goes back even to Christmas because there were seasons that people couldn't do that. But you think too, historically, even World War I and World War II stopped fighting on the day of Christmas.
Right.
Allies and enemies stopped fighting on the day of Christmas. That's one of the most historical things that's mind-boggling to me is that, whatever side of the nations of the troops on, they mutually agreed this one day we will not engage in war. I mean, wow.
So you're saying there's some hope for my social media feeds on December 25th. People will put down their bats and clubs and stop beating each other for 24 hours. Not that you should be spending time on social media much on Christmas. Be with your family, please. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think, as a sign that that's happening, you probably need to buy my books. And
that was a subtle segue. There's still time to get them shipped for Christmas. Perfect Christmas gifts. I that would be one thing I thought we should talk about too. Favorite Christmas gift growing up, as you look back.
The one,
as long as it's like Facebook Live appropriate. If it's something really strange, I don't know.
No, as a kid, the one that I can remember as a kid, one year I got everything Alvin from Alvin and the Chipmunks.
Really? Like stuffed or like
I got a stuffed. Yeah, I got a stuffed Alvin. I got Alvin pajamas. Man. I got Alvin roller skates. Alvin.
Was this when you were like 15 or are you a little bit younger?
No, I was actually 17. Okay. And no, honestly, I don't remember how old I was. I remember the house that we were in. And I don't know why that one stands out to me the most, but it's like the one Christmas as a kid I really, really remember the most in that. Now, last year, Wesley, easy now. Don't be giving away my secret.
Hard to find those in his size last year, but they did it.
Yeah, the downside about being an adult at Christmas, I don't get any gifts at Christmas. That's kind of the downside of that. There comes a point when you're too old and, the grandparents and the parents go, listen, we just, we're not going to give you any money this year or whatever the case may be, like what?
We love
but
you.
I was good.
I know I was on the right list. Come on.
I was good. So I don't have, as an adult, I don't know what, because my wife and we're not real big on getting each other Christmas gifts. For us, it's always been about the kids.
Right.
It's always been about making sure the kids have gifts. And, unfortunately for our children, a lot of times that means an abundance of clothes. So, they always know, oh, you're going to get us clothes.
You didn't have to individually wrap each pair of socks. This is ridiculous.
Well, you got to have the same equal amount of boxes per child, yep. So you do have to divide and conquer that way. But, that's one of the things as a kid, I remember that one. I don't know why that stands out in my mind, but that's always stood out in my mind. But as an adult, I don't have a Christmas gift that really is just like profound to me. As a gift, now I'm going to sound a little cheesy here and I know that, but just bear with me. For me, the Christmas gift per se is seeing the reaction of my kids.
Sure.
To me as an adult, that's been more impactful than anything. I would do anything, to see that smile from my kids, or, that moment of, whoa, that moment to me, that's the greatest gift as an adult, Now, if somebody wants to write me a check with some commas and a bunch of zeros, I might get excited about that.
Well, I think we all would get excited about that. No.
What about yourself?
It's interesting to think back. Like there were some Christmases, like there were times growing up when we were like really poor, and I remember like getting clothes for Christmas, and that was about it. And I remember not my favorite Christmas. Just gonna make that clear. It's like, wow, great. I remember like elementary age, I was really into like He-Man, Masters of the Universe, the cartoon and the action figures, or the dolls for boys, essentially, is what they were. But I remember like my aunt.
I had all those.
Me too. My aunt and some different people got me a bunch of those one year, and it was really special because like it was stuff that my mom couldn't have afforded at the time. So those always stood out to me as extremely special. I think I'm a lot like you in the sense, like probably the worst thing I get asked is like, what do you want for your birthday or Christmas, or like, what are the things I want? There's always a book I want here or there, but then again, I can get almost any book I want for free. So it's not super exciting, or coffee or something, but like, I don't know. I'm pretty content. I think part of that's just the season I'm in. I'm pretty happy with life, and I don't really need a whole lot of anything. Now, I'll take a check with commas and zeros too, as much as the next guy. I mean, I do have 10 kids. It's not like this place runs for free. But yeah, it's interesting how I think like when you're growing up, how important gifts, and some people like gifts are their love language. And so I get that they're really important, but like when you're growing up, gifts were so important. And, as an adult now, I'm just like, oh, great. Gifts are nice, but so it is interesting to be in a season where that's just not so much of a thing as it was growing up.
Yeah, and I think that's the difference also between men and women, because I would say this.
Yeah,
I don't have to have a.
When your wife tells you she doesn't need a gift or doesn't need a card or blah, 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 she's lying. Do not believe her. You will make that mistake once. You will never stop hearing the end of it. That's just a wise husband advice, because you said 23 years, we'll be 23 years coming up in December. So just going to throw that out there. When your wife says that she doesn't actually mean it.
Yeah. Well, you learn that, and that's one of those things. I got, on Mother's Day, I got my wife a picture that says, I can't think exactly how verbatim it says, but it says something like how one day changes everything, and it's every birthday of our children.
Nice.
And it's one of the most emotional gifts she's ever got, and so you realize the difference between men and women is, I didn't need that picture, but to her, that picture meant everything. Now, I think everybody, see if I can do this right there. That's probably the best Christmas gift. One of the best, How to Contend for Your Miracle. That book there, that would be, your wife would love that, lady, or husbands. Ladies, your husband would love this book. Your grandparents, your aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, kindergartners would love this book. If I had a copy of my latest book, I would even say that. Shameless plugs all over the place.
Good.
I'm just having fun with everybody in this.
Ooh, I did come up with a gift I would like, I guess. And this like the one thing I get excited about in this season is like podcasting equipment. Like I'm always looking for new microphones and stuff. So I think, was it last year for my birthday, my family got me the microphone I'm using right now. So that is the one thing I get excited about. I find it's more like the shiny object hobbies or things that I'm into, like, stuff that I might never buy myself. But outside of that, yeah, I get a lot of coffee for gifts, which is fine. I love coffee. I'm very happy about that. So
here's the question. Is it time to abandon Thanksgiving and Christmas?
I know. I was going to say, we need to reel this back in. Like, we need some kind of sensible conclusion. I guess my closing words about, is it time to abandon Thanksgiving and Christmas? And if you disagree with me, Ryan, you can take us in a different direction too. I would say no. That was just meant to be provocative and kind of a shocking question. I think we need to get back to the roots of where Thanksgiving and Christmas came out of, and possibly celebrate those things specifically and talk about those things with our family. I think we need to be willing to engage in culture. If somebody says, oh my gosh, we need to throw this away and throw that away because of all of these modern concerns that we're projecting back on people of old, some people are not going to agree with you, and you're going to have to maybe live to fight another day. But it's okay when the occasion arises and it's reasonable to have conversations and share your perspective with people, and use it as an opportunity to talk about, like in the case of Thanksgiving, share about the reasons the Pilgrims came over here in terms of getting out of a culture that they felt like was just wrecking their children, and to want to evangelize and like share their faith and live out their faith freely. Those are all great things, and so if you can talk about it in that way, maybe you can educate somebody that there's a lot more going on than just the handful of talking points that people are going to come at you with over and over. I think we're going to be in a season as we finish out 2020 and enter into 2021. I think we're going to be compressed more to stand up for and to have to be willing to stand up for our faith. I think we will see more challenges to our faith, and we really do need to know who we are and what we're about and be very secure in that, because we're going to have to dialogue with people about it and to hold on to, I would say, to hold on to our rights. We're going to have to be willing to know why we believe what we believe and why it's important. Because if we're completely ignorant of all this stuff, then eventually somebody can maybe talk us out of it. But, culturally, just know what you're about, share it with your kids, and keep perpetuating it forward, I guess. There you go.
I'm going to give the practical side of this. As Shaun gives the understanding from a Christian perception, let me give the practical side of this. Our modern culture right now is attacking the structure of family. And there are very few times throughout the year where family is the focus. I don't think it's time to abandon Thanksgiving and Christmas, because it is 2 times of the year that, more than the meal and the gifts, is where family can actually come together. Right. Even in the arguments and the disagreements and so on and so forth, we do set out a time for family and friends to come together. So for me, the practical side of this, because our culture is quickly eroding the structure of family, a father and a mother, children, grandparents, aunts, uncles. The practical side of this, I believe we need to dig in our heels and fight for the existence of Thanksgiving and Christmas, for the sake of our Christian beliefs, but also for the sake of family. That's real big for me. I mean, other than possibly the 4th of July, when do we get together as family? We do for birthdays sometimes. Right. But other than that, I mean, we got 2 times a year that the focus is family, 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 family. And ultimately, one of the things that we always say is kingdom is family. And so in the Jewish culture, the Passover is a time that family came together to remember. In Gentile culture, Thanksgiving and Christmas is a time that family comes together to remember. We remember to be thankful to God, who has given his grace and mercy, his love, and bestowed it upon our life. And at Christmas, we remember the birth of Christ, but we do it as family.
Yeah, I think culturally, one of the interesting challenges we have right now is we've lost a lot of our markers in terms of rites of passage and milestones and all those things. They're just slowly being taken away, and so that without any sense of where you came from, where you are presently, you'll probably have no idea where you're going. And so losing all those markers of who we tend to be as a family, as a church family, all as a nation. I feel like that is part of the reason people feel so kind of listless and lost, or any cause, any group will do. I just need some place to belong that kind of makes me feel like I'm important or doing something. And I think some of that is just not having a grounding in any of those sort of historic markers is the weird place we find many of us are in this time. I feel like it's a problem that is increasingly getting worse, and without actually being intentional about coming together as a family, I feel like that loss of family identity and family belonging is going to continue to get more difficult.
Yeah. So for this to wrap right here, how can, if people don't know, they're coming on here, maybe they're connected with me and they don't know much about the Shaun Tabatt Show, direct people to find out.
Yeah, if you want to check out my content, you can head over to shauntabatt.com or just search for Shaun Tabatt in Google, and you'll find all of the places I am on the social media, as the older folks say. And I think I've done 214 episodes so far this year, so a fair amount of content has run through this little laptop I'm talking to you on. But not all of my conversations are as wild and crazy as my talks with Ryan are, but we do try to keep them interesting. So would love to connect with people. And if somehow any of the content I produce challenges you, impacts you, reach out. I'd love to connect and hear from people. I think we do need to make note, Ryan, that I have finally graduated to a new level, that I finally got my first piece of weird conspiracy mail last weekend. Behind the scenes, Ron and I do talk about some of the weird messages we get, mail that gets sent to our house, often related to things we've said on our podcast or this, that, or the other thing. I get emails and weird comments, but I've never actually gotten physical mail until this last weekend. So I feel like I have arrived at some new level. Like, this for me is a marker, a milestone. Like, I'm a legit podcaster now.
For those that may not be familiar with the story, that's been happening to me now for a few months. And that's what's making that so funny, because I feel like in one particular case, obviously the guy's hand making postcards and mailing it to me. So I feel like that's a huge accomplishment from your mom's basement. So, but I have gotten letters too in the mail, actual letters that were 8 pages long, front and back.
Wow.
Correcting me, so those are fun. So welcome to the club, sir. So
I knew I couldn't be a real, I know how Pinocchio felt when he became a real boy. I am now a real podcaster. Anyhow, I wanted to make sure we worked that in, because that was just such a important moment for me, that I'm cool like you now.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, for those that are listening on Shaun's podcast and not familiar with us, you can follow us at ryanjohnson.us, and you can find all of our social media. Plus, we're on the Facebook and the Twitter.
Just like everybody else in their 40s on the Facebook.
Yeah, we're on Parler, we're on MeWe, we're on Instagram, all that stuff. The Blacksmith Chronicles is a podcast that we host weekly, and I do interviews and conversations with different people, and I even do solo things as well. I may do a solo teaching, I may do a solo sermon, but those are kind of interwoven in there as well as a part of that. And we're on YouTube as well. Subscribe. Both of us is on YouTube. There's a Shaun Tabatt Show YouTube channel, subscribe to it. And there's a Ryan Johnson Ministries YouTube channel, subscribe on that. You get all the podcasts and more on Shaun's, and on my YouTube, you get all the podcasts and more as well. So subscribe to both of those, and share.
Yes.
I think we got everything. Did we solve the world's problems?
I don't think we solved the world's problems, but at the very least, people found out about some of the things we like related to Thanksgiving and Christmas. And apparently we're both still pretty conservative in our values.
I do have one final question. Why is the carpet all wet?
I don't know. Where is the carpet all wet? I'm so confused.
It's a line from Christmas Vacation.
Oh.
Why is the carpet all wet, Todd? I don't know, Margot.
It's been a while. See, no, that's a movie my wife actually won't watch. And so, I probably have to watch that by myself or with my older kids. So My wife grew up Baptist. She's got standards, not like the crazy Lutherans that were in my neighborhood. So
I don't know what that says about my wife because she watches it.
That just has to do with your influence on her, pretty much. So there you go, man.
Possibly. So,
all right. Well, it's been fun. Bye,
it's been
everybody.
a blast.
Thanks for hanging out with us. We hope you learned something. If not, I'm sure we'll get letters.
Yeah, maybe.